welcome to the CanFit Podcast's fourth episode, Health is Wealth. With me today, we have the legendary, the man of many accolades and accomplishments, Tom Zheng. Tom Zheng, can you tell us a little
Hey,
bit more about yourself?
sure. First off, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. My name's Tom Zheng. My background is in health and performance as well as organizational leadership. I've been in the sports and I guess rehab field for about the last 10 years. My career journey is highlighted by my stint with the San Francisco 49ers. I was their performance therapist from 2019 to 2022. I am currently an entrepreneur with my hands in I guess a lot of different things is a good way to put it.
Impressive, impressive. Man, we are so happy to have you here. Thank you again for spending some time with us today. We'll be tackling a couple topics, well, a few topics actually. And today's first topics will be the importance of rest and recovery. So, does your approach differ between athletic individuals versus like the average person when trying to emphasize the importance of rest and recovery?
That's a good question. Yes and no, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit. The only difference between a person and an athlete is really the amount of physical load and volume that you experience throughout a day, as well as what you're technically training for, right? So, at a base level, recovery really just refers to the amount of time your physical and nervous system needs to return to baseline. So, in essence, everybody needs recovery from their daily demands. So, that's the no portion. The yes portion is the amount of recovery as well as possibly the type. So if you are a professional athlete, you are going through a lot more physical demand. You're creating a lot more micro tears in your musculature. You're stimulating your nervous system with high intensity exercise. So in terms of recovery modalities, I would suggest something a little bit different versus a person versus a professional athlete, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. So, what would be like some strategies that you would suggest, like if they wanted to improve their rest and recovery efforts? Like, could you give us examples for the just the daily average person, the everyday person and an athlete?
Definitely, definitely. So I will start with kind of the encompassing aspect first that everybody needs. So sleep is your most important recovery tool. As an adult that's, I guess, above the age of 18, you would really want to shoot for 7 to 9 hours of solid sleep a night. And I'll break the sleep aspect down a little bit. So you have three primary stages of sleep, and they all attribute slightly differently to the area of recovery, whether it's your actual physiological body, like your musculature, your tendons, your organs, or your nervous system. And then the third component is your circulatory system, where you kind of rid a lot of the waste that you've accumulated through the day. Or if you're sick, your lymphatic system helps you get rid of a lot of the inflammation as well as the bad virus or bacteria. So, to break down the three stages of sleep, you have first your light sleep. So, this doesn't pertain to too much. It really is just the state where your body starts to relax, your temperature starts to drop, and your heart rate and your breath rate starts slowing down. Your eye movement as your eyes are closed starts to stop, and your brain waves slow down. So, the biggest benefit of this is it actually prepares you, it's a precursor to the most important part of sleep, which is your deep sleep. So, your deep sleep is when your body is fully at rest, your eyes and your muscles are fully relaxed, there is no tonic stress in them. So during the sleep, your body's actually repairing itself. It's regrowing tissue. So those micro tears I mentioned, if you're a athlete, you really want to emphasize the deep sleep component so that your body will be ready for the next couple of days of training. This is also the stage of sleep where your immune system basically reboots and it recirculates itself. So when you're sick, you might notice that you sleep a lot more. It's because your body is craving this deep sleep to help you rid your immune system of all of those attackers that are essentially irritating it. So during this deep sleep cycle, it's the worst time to wake you up. So if you've ever woken up in the morning and you felt terrible, incredibly groggy, like you don't even want to move, it's because your alarm woke you up during the deep sleep cycle. So we're going to go into the last stage of the sleep cycle, which is your REM sleep. So this is your dream stage. It's called the rapid eye movement cycle, where your eyes are actually rapidly moving while the rest of your body is still, I wouldn't say relaxed. It's more of a state of paralysis where your brain secretes a chemical messenger to inhibit your body from enacting all of those crazy things you're doing in a dream. So during this stage, you're also preparing your heart rate as well as the rest of your body for an awake cycle for what you have to do when you wake up. So when you wake up feeling extremely refreshed, ready to go, you woke up during your REM sleep cycle.
I see. So, are naps beneficial or necessary?
Absolutely. Naps are extremely beneficial. So every time you go in a sleep cycle, it usually occurs in cycles of 90 minutes, right? You have differentiating amounts of light sleep, deep sleep, and REM sleep. Naps are extremely beneficial if you're able to wake up during that REM sleep cycle. If you wake up during that deep sleep cycle, it will ruin the rest of your day.
Yeah. So I'm sure you've encountered some maybe athletes or individuals within your profession that maybe don't have the time, the 7 to 9 hours. What would you suggest to those individuals?
That's a great question. So there are a couple of things that you can do to prepare your body so that it's easier to slip into those cycles so that you might not have the quantity of sleep, but the quality of sleep is substantially better. And I can list them out. So very commonly and very well known nowadays is blue light, right? Your body operates on something called a circadian rhythm. It's basically your body's internal clock of processing a 24-hour day. When you have late night exposure to like a laptop or your phone, there's a large amount of blue light that goes into what's your photoganglion cells. I know, weird word, in your
No,
eyes
okay.
that stimulate your brain to think, oh, it might be daytime. So that impacts how fast you're able to go through the light sleep portion and actually go into the deep sleep. So it's delayed, essentially. Um, Caffeine is another factor. So I'm drinking my coffee right now. So caffeine has a half-life of 12 hours. What that means is it takes 12 hours for the molecules of caffeine that stimulate you to stay awake and not be tired to degrade or break down in your body. So ideally, you don't really want to drink caffeine later in the day because that's going to impact I'll go a little bit into biology nerd, the adenosine receptors in your brain, thereby keeping you a little bit more awake. The last thing is alcohol. Now, and totally cool with going out for a couple of beers because I mean it's fun, it's social, but with the implication, particularly if you are a professional grade athlete, alcohol is really bad for your body as well as really bad for your sleep. What happens is alcohol basically has an inhibitory function that does not let you get into deep sleep at all. So anybody who's had probably more than 5 to 6 drinks have woken up with a headache, feeling groggy, feeling slightly miserable, maybe even nauseous. It's because that alcohol content inhibits your body from getting into that deep sleep cycle. So you never actually get recovery as you sleep. You actually toss and turn a lot more, and it's very disruptive.
Man, who would have thought that sleep was so crucial to one's well-being, honestly? Um, and with that, like, could you share an example or story in your professional experience that highlights the impact of rest and recovery on an athlete's performance and well-being?
Absolutely. I will fully disclose I am not a professional athlete, but I did run high school track. So I'm going to use my personal example, if that's okay. So as a health and sports scientist, I am a big fan of monitoring, particularly biomonitoring, right? I want to track all of my health data, essentially. So I wear rings, I wear wristbands to keep a track of my sleep, my activity level, even my hydration level. So what I noticed was on the nights that I actually did drink alcohol, my sleep was extremely scattered. The wake up rate was probably about 5 to 8 times greater than I normally would have on a daily pattern. And when I woke up, of course, I didn't feel as great. And a lot of the apps nowadays give you a readiness score. Um, my readiness score was substantially below what it normally was. And even going through daily training or taking an athlete through a training regimen, it severely impacts your ability to perform.
Wow. That was our last question for that topic. Thank you, man. You really have shed some insight to rest and recovery and the importance of it. We'll be right back on the Can It Fit podcast. Thank you for watching. Welcome back. And this our second topic will be training styles for beginners. Just for those that are on the fence about starting their own fitness journey, but really would like some insights because we all, at the end of the day, would like a better quality of life if we're feeling somewhat miserable, right? So with us, Tom Zheng. Thank you again for joining. So which training styles or approaches would you suggest to beginners or those that are just starting their fitness journey?
I absolutely agree with what you just said. It's always a exercise is a very good tool for regulating mood, regulating hormones. But it is a little tough to get started, especially if you're new to the field or new to kind of working out. So what I always advise is start slow and keep track of three factors really: your load, your volume, as well as your recovery. And I can elaborate a little bit on that. So load, it just refers to how much weight you're pushing, right? So all that means is when you're going onto a bench, we'll just use the bench as an example, you can probably do 85, 100, 105, 200, whatever your max is. You can do a lot of load, but that also has a large effect on your muscle tissue, and that relates to soreness the next day. So when you're just starting getting back into the gym, a good rule of thumb is to use a load or the amount of weight that you can do 6 to 8 reps without basically failing at the end, if that makes sense.
Definitely.
Uh,
And
Second fact,
of course.
oh, go ahead.
Um, no, go ahead. I apologize.
No, 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 please, please. I love a discussion.
Yeah, about like those individuals, maybe I would suggest starting at the basics, just like the basic functioning movements, right? Like I would also input that if you don't walk, start walking. If you don't, do any sort of physical activity, start somewhere. It's at least start a foundation and understand the importance of having a foundation as well. Go ahead.
I completely agree with that 100%. And that actually segues perfectly into the second point, which is volume. So it's the amount of total activity you're actually participating in. So with load and volume, basically, if you increase either one, you're going to get what's called an adaptive change in your body. So your body's actually going to take in a lot of the new sensory information that you're doing, and then it's going to adapt, change its physiology to keep up with that demand. And what F said was on point. If you are somebody who thought about working out, but you don't really know what you're doing, if you don't normally walk, if you're very sedentary, starting to walk is enough of an adaptive change, particularly in the volume aspect, to get your body starting to regulate on a couple of different things. So along that route, I'm going to go into a little strength training principle. So it's called periodizational training. All it refers to is your body takes an X amount of time for it to adapt to a new stimulus or a new training style, whether it's walking, whether it's lifting, whether it's CrossFit, whatever you want to say. It usually takes about 3 weeks for it to get enough of a change so that you're able to perform the exercise or the movement with more efficiency, less risk of injury, as well as less bounce back in terms of the soreness aspect. So what I would recommend is starting the first 3 weeks, go slow, pick something you're comfortable with, stick with for 3 weeks, maybe take a week off, let your body recover, and then basically do something a little bit higher in terms of the load or the volume the following 3 week cycle, and then continually build until you reach a point where you're relatively happy, if that makes sense.
Definitely, definitely. And always understand the importance of form as well as listening to your body because we can easily want to push ourselves, past our limits, but understand that we are also fragile sometimes in our infancy of the journey of our fitness journey. And just have patience with yourself because like you said, 3 weeks, it's going to take some time for you to, really see some results or difference. So thank you for shedding light on that as well. So are there any specific considerations or modifications that you'd recommend to those that are looking to or selecting, looking to select? So I do apologize. Looking to select a new training styles. Any thoughts?
Absolutely. I definitely, I mean, I have a personal bias. So with my education and my background, I tend to focus a lot on the biomechanics aspect of any type of training as opposed to kind of the lift more aspect. So the biggest thing for me is actually what you just mentioned, is proper form as well as proper training style, if you will, to prevent injury, to ensure that you're steadily progressing in your gains. So one of the worst things for both athletes and everyone else is you can have steady gains for the first 6 months, but then if you have an acute injury or you have something go weird, that can lay you down for 4 to 6 weeks. That basically impacts not just your physiology of getting back into training or maintaining any gains, you'll lose a good amount, but also the mental factor because one, the motivation is now severely impacted because you're not able to do something. Two, even though it might not be the most major of injuries, there's a lot of psychological fear that goes with it, especially if you're going back into a movement that you got hurt from in the first place. So, just, I know I went off a little tangent, but the most important thing is, of course, stay healthy, start small, you can't go wrong with a good warm up. So, what I always personally tell anybody I work with is you want to do soft tissue mobilization. So, you want to roll out on a roller to increase your joint movement a little bit, warm the muscles up, get some circulation in there. Then you go through some dynamic stretching to prepare your joints for actual movement. And then you slowly ramp your workout up into a point where kind of like the mid of your workout should be the peak, and then it's like a ramp down. Let me know if that makes sense.
No, that does, and that leads me to like really highlight the importance again of form and understanding proper form and technique, especially when you first start out. Because let's say that you're confident, because you're seeing all these gains, right? But your form is terrible. Well, those gains will stop, and because your form will injure you at some point. I've had a back spasm that put me out about 6 months. And let me tell you, that did a lot to your mental health as well. Yeah, and your physical well being. And overcoming that really gave me a huge gratification that I didn't have before for having good health and proper form and the importance of both. So, yeah, thank you for really adding some insights to that as well.
Just to throw one more thing in there, I don't think I actually touched on the training style.
Yeah.
Um, just to elaborate, what I generally recommend for myself, as well as a lot of people I work with, is working the inverse muscle group. That way you have a full body balance so that you do, I guess you can say, reduce the risk of some of those wear and tear injuries. So what I mean by inverse is if you're doing a bench press or like a chest press, make sure you do a row, which is the opposite motion for the opposite muscle group. This way, there's a good dynamic tension between the front and the back, side to side, as well as the cross rotations. And that's going to lead to a little bit more healthy joint health.
Yeah, and I honestly also recommend mobility work too. Like you said, that would
Mhm.
really help because getting you stretched and your body being able to relax and rest and become more flexible over time because there are benefits to having more flexibility in your joints, right? So,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to longevity and old age, right?
Yeah, that's kind of one of the biggest things that goes away as we age is our muscle fibers. Well, there's two things that happens in our muscle fibers. So the ability to basically be pliable, or the elasticity trait, your muscle fiber's ability to do this, glide seamlessly, it starts to have endpoints that are closer and closer together, and then you start developing adhesions more and more. So that limits the actual ability for the fibers to glide. Secondarily, it's a term called sarcopenia. Essentially, your body now loses muscle mass and fills it in with fat. So after the age, I think around 40 or so, the rate rapidly increases, especially if you're not um, doing any type of load training, as well as your diet severely impacts that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And we do, up here, we're trying to, with this platform as well, highlight not just one side, but both as well. So, fitness, good health, yeah, there are so much value to have from learning about both, especially in depth. So, that would be that topic. Thank you, Tom, again. We'll be right back on the Canafit podcast. Good one. Welcome back to the Counterfeit Podcast. And this topic now is CBD. I've honestly been looking forward to this one for a while now. So, to give you a little more information, CBD or cannabidiol is a non psychoactive cannabinoid within the cannabis plant. And it does have so many benefits medicinally, therapeutically as well. And it ranges from being an analgesic, anti-inflammatory, anti-emetic, plus more. And to speak more in depth about CBD is Tom. Thank you, Tom, again for joining us on this really informative episode. So thank you all again, the audience, for sticking in with us. This is definitely more heavier on the information than our previous episode. So thank you. Tom, we're going to just start with the questions. Um, so, what is your perspective on the potential benefits of CBD consumption for fitness enthusiasts and athletes?
So I think there's been a little bit of a movement, particularly in the last 5 years, on I guess, the analgesic or the pain relief application of CBD. In terms of consumption, subjectively, I can't say too much in terms of experience with it, but topical application has a very good effect on pain and inflammation, especially pertaining to autoimmune as well as joint. One brand that I have come across that I really like is CBMD. They're created by physicians, and that is exactly kind of the target area that their topical ointment is meant for, is to reduce pain and inflammation in specific tissues or joints. I think athletes and everyone else, there's really no difference. Like, everybody gets aches and pains, everybody gets a inflammation response, particularly if you're sedentary or you overuse a wrist, you overuse a bicep, whatever. But CBD has been shown to basically reduce the pain sensory aspect as well as the long term inflammation aspect.
I like that because also, like you said, topically, CBD, that's a great method of consumption, like topical agents. And like they
Just
do,
to pop on that one too, topical application is actually better for your liver. Particularly, a lot of the times, it's just the way that your body digests whatever you're putting on or absorbs. It's had a shown increase in positivity for the liver, especially if you are taking a lot of supplements. Let me know if that makes sense.
it does. And that's a great note to add, especially because there are so many people that are just unaware about the possible benefits that this cannabinoid could bring. Thank you again for highlighting the importance of just topical agent, even topical applications. They do have their place as well because not everyone can, eat an edible, or not everyone can consume other methods So topically is an important one to highlight. Are there any misconceptions or myths that you've encountered regarding CBD and its effects on performance and recovery?
So I don't have a huge amount of experience pertaining to this specifically, but I think one of the most common things that I've come across is the difference between CBD and THC. Some misconceptions are they are the same thing, but there is a vast difference in what they actually do. The CBD aspect is the anti-inflammation as well as the pain reduction, as well as it has a host of other potential benefits depending on, I mean, what clinical study you read. And the THC is more of the hallucinogenic as well as the aspect that gets you all of those sensory
The psychoactive.
augmentations. Yeah, psychedelic. Thank you.
The psychoactive, yeah.
Psychoactive. Appreciate that,
Of
F.
course, of course.
um, yeah, but that's kind of the biggest thing I've come across.
And that's good to highlight because it's not as scary of a subject once you actually learn about it as most topics, right? And you'd be surprised about what you learn, especially in the field of cannabis, because again, it's not often highlighted this aspect of the plant, the potential benefits and cool stories and influences that it has had on individuals, ranging from athletes to just your daily user. It's really nice to be able to have a platform where people are able to come on and share their input and personal lived experiences. Also, the next question would be, if you had to give any advice, how should athletes feel towards a CBD integration?
That's a great question. Um, so, as a professional, I can't directly give advice. All I can do is give my experience as well as share what I would do.
Mm-hmm.
So, as we mentioned before, I think CBD integration, especially topically for pain, for recovery, for inflammation, especially post exercise, or if you're dealing with something more chronic or something autoimmune, could have a host of benefits in reducing those types of pain as well as if you get the swelling aspect as well. So, professional experience and personal experience, topical ointment for pain and inflammation.
Awesome, thank you. Well, that would be that with that topic. Thank you, Tom, for sharing your opinions and personal experiences with CBD integration and consumption. Thank you again. We'll be right back on the CanFit podcast. Welcome back to the CanFit podcast. Our next topic is entrepreneurship. I'm really excited to talk to Tom about this part of his life's journey. So, Tom, what inspired you to start Adapt Health and Performance?
Thanks. Yeah. So basically, Adapt Health and Performance is a good medley and a good mix of my professional experience. So, being a health and sports scientist, I've worked in a clinical setting, at a professional sports setting, in both a therapy aspect as well as kind of like on the more sciencey aspect. So, I started Adapt after I left the NFL as a venture committed to revolutionizing the health and performance, particularly in the athletic sphere. Adapt is really engaged in extensive R&D as well in R&D, particularly for recovery tech, for sports tech, as well as health tech, that is able to be integrated and help an athlete recover from all of the things that they have to do. So it hits on both points of my professional background in terms of being able to treat the ailment of, let's say, knee pain, right? And at the same time, being able to go specifically into the science of figuring out and helping companies that develop these techs figure out what the best application is, how they can be more effective, and basically how we can help them grow from there. So it kind of hits both spheres, and that's what I've learned being an entrepreneur is you're able to do what makes you passionate, but at the same time your passion grows in different areas, so it's always an exploratory journey. But at the end of the day, I'll wrap it back into adapt. It's about integrating both innovative and proven health and recovery technologies to elevate physiological function of everyone and everyday people.
Wow. And when did you start this new venture?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it was back last year, beginning of last year, maybe, and mid last year, 2022.
Nice, nice. And who do you market towards specifically?
So it's been interesting. So when I started Adapt, it was mostly, I've been lucky enough to not have to do any advertising, just on the referral aspect alone of current patient tells as well as previous professional athletes. I've been able to get a good amount of patient tell that way. Um, but in terms of the growth aspect, which I mentioned before, that's when I realized doing the treatment aspect, I'm very good at it, but it doesn't feed the science and the creativity side of things. So that's when I branched off and using my professional background in education, I started kind of helping companies and even working on developing specific types of health and recovery tech. So to answer your question, it's marketed to basically everybody.
That's awesome. So, do you have any goals with this with Adapt Health?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's basically it's an exploratory journey. We're at a phase right now where everything is becoming a little bit more concrete. So as it grows, I don't really have a end goal. It's just gonna be dependent on the trajectory it takes as everything starts growing.
All right. And so, what have been some challenges that you faced as an entrepreneur in a rapidly evolving market?
So that's a little difficult for me to answer just because as an entrepreneur, and I'm sure you know this, and everybody who's started a business in the audience would know this, you face a different challenge every day that you basically have to overcome, you have to learn from, you have to adapt to.
Mm,
But that's also kind of the fun part is figuring out the solution that might not be the right solution, but you're just going to have to trust yourself that it's the one that's going to help you get the furthest and it's the one that's going to help you grow. So I've been lucky enough to work with a plethora of different companies, mostly in the startup side, from pre-seed all the way up to Series B. So that's what I mean by every day is a new challenge. And the benefit is I'm actually getting to learn from a lot of different people, especially in a lot of different fields that aren't in my domain of expertise. So I continually get to grow. And that's what I mean by feeding the scientist inside me.
and that's awesome, man. And I can relate as an entrepreneur. It is honestly like there are some challenges that we do face, but we have to convince ourselves that we will overcome them, and we do usually find a way to. And that's just the mindset you have to adopt when you're pursuing these huge ventures, like starting your own business or company, etc. Could you please share a memorable milestone from this part of your journey that you are particularly proud of?
I absolutely can. I think I can share two, if that's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and the second one basically encompasses my feelings towards a lot of the founders that I've gotten to work with. So for the first one, I've been lucky enough to be asked to be the chairman of Players Only Network. It's basically a social platform where it helps an athlete develop and grow and monetize on their brand at the same time being able to double that as a scouting platform. It's powered by AI as well as it's a what's the best word? It's a mix between a LinkedIn and a TikTok for athletes.
Oh, wow, that's exciting. That's really
Yeah.
innovative,
So
really.
yeah. So I'm
Well,
very excited to work with something that is still in the athletic sphere, but it's a different application of my skill set, which makes me very happy because now not only do I get to apply something different, but I also get to grow my skill tree in that aspect.
yeah.
um, secondly, the second aspect that I am very proud of and it's memorable is I recently got to start working with a collagen brand called Protiva. They are very cool in the sense that they actually have a clinical study backing their product. as well as the proprietary blend of their collagen, is able to have a substantial higher rate of absorption compared to a lot of things on the market.
Wow.
So you get more bang for your buck, your body is a little happier.
Man, you're part of so many cool, like really impressive and inspiring organizations. Players only. How have you been liking being a part of, like a chairman for them?
Oh, I love it. I've been I've been very blessed, and it's been a really fun job. I've gotten to build a very extensive and a very, I guess, highly touted advisory board for them, as well as kind of growing the company and helping the founder strategically implement certain things with my kind of athletic and educational background. It's, you know, the organizational leadership part of my PhD, I didn't think was going to be a large contributing factor in a lot of things, particularly when you're a health and sports scientist. But I found that that has become a huge, huge kind of a stepping board to prepare me into being able to serve in these types of roles.
Wow. And we're all about celebrations over here. So thank you. Really incredible stuff and feats.
Thank you.
Yeah, every time. Um, yeah, and thank you for sharing all of your experiences with us during that topic. We'll be right back on the CanFit podcast. Welcome back. And our final topic of this episode, number 4, health is wealth, is unique experiences and lessons with Tom Zheng, this legend right here. All right. Could you could you please share a time when you had to think creatively or outside of the box when you tried to address an athlete's performance or recovery issue?
Absolutely. I think this happens a lot more than I think this applies to every case. So what I mean by that is in terms of the corrective programming that I do, particularly with the exercise selection, recovery modality selection to help correct biomechanical compensations, everybody has a different biomechanical movement that is unique to their own body. So anytime I work with anybody, one of the biggest things I look to and I guess evaluate, a better word, is how they're a mover, how do they move, what they're comfortable in, and relate that back to what's traditionally a good movement pattern, right? So every time I work with an athlete or I work with a patient or anything in between, what I really try to do is keep an open mind and basically figure out what is going to work for this person for their goal, because not every injury is the same, not every body is the same, and not every body is going to react to XYZ the same. So, as a practitioner, that is one of the biggest things that is an exploratory journey, particularly in the first couple of meetings, is you're trying to figure out what is going to work best for this person to get them to their goal the fastest.
And that's honestly the goal here is just trying to get people healthy, right? So I'm glad that you really fulfill your role in that space. Yeah, a lot of athletes, I'm sure, appreciate your expertise and passion, in that area. And could you please highlight like one particular training approach that you found to be highly effective?
So that's also a great question. So as a person of mixed bags, a lot of different things have gone into it. I can't really say one thing is better than another, but certain things do resonate better with different people. Like a certain technique, whether it's soft tissue, whether it's manipulation, whether it's corrective training, whether it's XYZ in terms of recovery modalities, sometimes merit a more benefit on one person versus the other.
Mhm.
So, like I mentioned before, it's really to figure out in the scenario as well as who you're working with what is going to work best for them.
Right. Like, for example, if someone is like a beginner and no experience, comes from a sedentary lifestyle, and a good thing to do is to ask them about a goal. Like, would they like to ride a bike? And if they, don't know how or have the endurance of doing that just yet, train them to build that endurance up. Start walking a little bit more. Maybe if they know how to bike already, bike a short distance. um, we you just have to find what works best for the individual at the end of the day. And everyone is so unique, you know, and we all have things that we prefer and movements that we prefer over others. So it's good to always have like a brief consultation as well too.
Mhm. I'll give you a good personal story regarding my wife, if that's cool.
Of course, yeah.
um, so my wife, she's an active individual, but she's not an athlete, right? So her, like, unlike myself, her growing up, she didn't go to practice, go strength train 4 hours a day. So as we kind of, I guess, train together, a lot of the feedback that she always gives me is, I'm not one of your 300-pound professional athletes. I don't want to do this. I can't lift that much. And I'm like, okay, I have to reshift my mind and figure out, okay, this
Hmm.
type of criteria is not going to work for her because she's absolutely right. She's a 100-pound female.
Mm, yeah.
um, she is not going to do a squat jump with a bar on her back. So I think you alluded to it perfectly. It varies so much for a person that it's really, you have to figure out what you're comfortable with, what you're confident with, because if you have that mental mindset, it actually has a physiological kind of response, which is proven by science.
Exactly. So again, to bring it all back, listen to your body always. Rest and recovery. Don't forget to get some sleep while, where and when you can. And naps. You know, I've learned about the importance of naps a little bit. I've been skipping them a little bit, so I guess I shouldn't neglect them any longer. Thank you, Tom. Again, where can our audience find more of your resources or content?
If you just want to look up Tom Zheng on Google, my LinkedIn will pop up, my website will pop up, a lot of the different things will pop up, and you can pick and peruse as you would wish. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do. Always happy to connect with different people, and if you need any advice, also happy to shell that out.
Awesome. I really hope to have you on in the future. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Of course, Tom. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Well, I'll see you next time.